Hey guys, alright, today we are watching Did the Trojan War Really Happen by Kings and Generals. I have had pretty much, sorry, one of the top recommended channels that you all comment on is Kings and Generals or Epic History TV. So now I'm finally gonna react to Kings and Generals. The reason, I don't think I've verbally addressed as to why I don't really react to Kings and Generals videos. It's because they are mainly battle videos, and I personally don't. I somewhat comment on military strategy now and then, but I don't know enough really to, I feel like, where I could provide a competent reaction to when it comes to like Kings and Generals main videos. But I do want to react to more of their videos, so I might end up be going through their uploaded videos and seeing if they have other videos that are like this, their question videos, their did this really happen kind of stuff. That's the stuff I kind of want to focus on. Perhaps later, as the channel grows, I'll branch out more and try and provide good commentary on like Kings and Generals typical content, their battle overlay videos and stuff. But enough talk. Let's just go ahead and watch this video and see what their research has provided, and based on the research that they've done, see what they say about the Trojan War. One last thing before we start, because I do want to say, I do believe the Trojan War did happen to a certain extent. Now, did Troy get burnt to the ground by the Greeks? Maybe not. That might be a mix of the Greek War and then the destruction of Troy is brought upon by the barbarians. Perhaps. Now, this is just going off of I've never done real research on the Trojan War, so take what I'm saying here with a grain of salt. I say that following the war against the Greek city-states, Troy was heavily weakened from it, and that weakened state allowed for those barbarians that ended up moving in. And these barbarians, I think a certain number of them are the ancestors to what would become Sparta later on. Barbarians that would then sack the weakened Troy. That's what I suspect might be a likely scenario based off of my very, very brief understanding of the history of the Trojan War, or the supposed history of the Trojan War.
Menin ida Theopiliado Achilleus. Sing, goddess, the rage of Achilles.
Alright, he's gonna speak Greek.
The first line of the Iliad sets the scene for its climax. Patroclus, paramour of the king of the Myrmidons, is dead, slain at the hands of Hector, the prince of Troy. In his grief, Achilles' wrath knows no bounds. Consumed with vengeance and bloodlust, no soldier, prince, or even river spirit is a match for the immortal son of Thetis. As the Trojan army flees back behind their gates, one warrior remains outside, the eldest prince of Troy. As Achilles chases Hector around the walls of his city, Zeus considers rescuing him from the Myrmidons' wrath. Alas, Hector's fate has been weighed upon the golden scale, and his life is forfeit. Knowing the gods have abandoned him, the Prince of Troy turns to face his foe and prepares to make his final stand. The showdown between Hector and Achilles is one of the most well-known and enduring scenes in all of Western literature. Yet equal to its impact is the everlasting question: did it really happen? Was there ever a war between the Greeks and the city of Troy? Was there even a city of Troy? In this video, we will compare fact to legend and explore the true history of the iconic Iliad. This episode is brought to you by Intel, thanks to their long-standing partnership with Creative Assembly, and Total War Saga Troy, a glory. Total War Saga Troy will be available for free if you claim it from the Epic at the link below. the real history of the Trojan War is dubious at best. The Iliad itself is inseparable from the magic of the Olympian gods, who constantly provide divine intervention for both sides. In Book 12, Zeus conjures a massive thunderstorm that wreaks havoc through the Greek army, allowing the Trojans to push them all the way back to their ships, only for Poseidon to grow jealous of his brother's power and imbue Ajax with superhuman strength, allowing him to force back the Trojan advance. When this magic is stripped away, is there enough left to prove the existence of a real city of Troy, or a great war fought outside its walls? Before we talk about the potential existence of Troy, we should perform a brief survey of the wider world it existed in. The epic cycle, which the Iliad belongs to, is often associated with classical antiquity. This is the most famous era of ancient Greece, and features the golden ages of Athens and Sparta, the iconic hoplite, and the Persian Wars.
True.
However,
Can't
in
argue
truth,
against that.
the stories of Homer's Iliad would have been as distant a memory to a classical Athenian as the fables of King Arthur are to modern Britons. Indeed, to understand
fuck, I can't speak. That is certainly an analogy. Yeah, let's see. Arthur. Yeah, that'd be around the time of the Vikings too. Maybe a bit older. Yeah, that works.
And the historical
The math
context
adds up.
behind the Iliad, we must go back nearly a millennium earlier to the early Bronze Age and explore the world of the mysterious Mycenaeans. Rising to prominence around 1600 BC, these ancient forebears to the classical Greeks would have been familiar yet alien to the 5th century Athenian playwright. They worshipped an early form of the Olympian pantheon and wrote their records in a script known as Linear B, which was wholly distinct from the ancient Greek alphabet. Their power was centered in aristocratic palace complexes across Crete and southern Greece, the most important of which was the titular Mycenae, located in Argos, where the semi-mythical Agamemnon of the House of Atreus was said to have ruled.
By the way, a lot of these names I am not going to know. So, I know Agamemnon, of course. I know Hector. I know Odysseus, and I know Achilles and his boyfriend Pericles or whatever. I think that was his name. And then of course I know the prince that takes Agamemnon's wife over to Troy. I don't remember her name, but I know the famous line from I think Homer made the line, "The face that launched 1,000 ships."
The Mycenaeans
I think
were
he
a
came up with that.
thalassocracy with greater ships than nearly all of their contemporaries. They roamed the seas, growing rich by trade with the Hittites, the Assyrians, and Egypt. The Eastern Mediterranean Bronze Age world was tethered by trade connections often established by the ambitious Mycenaean sea lords. However, the Mycenaeans were as much warriors as they were merchants, and as often as they came to trade, so too did they come to conquer. Across the Mediterranean, the sight of bird-beaked prows atop Mycenaean galleys struck fear into all who saw them. This golden age was not to last, for in the early 12th century BC, all the great civilizations of the Eastern Mediterranean, save Egypt, would all topple in a crash of apocalyptic proportions known as the Bronze Age collapse. What brought about this destruction of civilization remains a mystery, but is most likely linked to the brutal invasions of the vaguely defined Sea Peoples, among them possibly some Mycenaean pirates. Whatever their origin, the great Bronze Age palaces of Mycenae were entirely abandoned in their wake, and in the fallout, ancient Greece entered a 4-century-long period known as its Dark Ages. Trade links were severed, towns shrunk, society became more rural, and artwork became more simplistic. Most importantly, Linear B was abandoned, giving way to an illiterate society. However, even as the Greeks of the Dark
I wonder if, when they say illiterate, I wonder if they actually were illiterate, because I know sometimes the idea of literacy gets muddled throughout history. Obviously, like there's a very common misconception of medieval society being illiterate. They weren't. They could speak, a good number of them could write and could read their own language, the French language, the English language, German. They could do that. But they could not read probably the vast majority, obviously, could not read or write in Latin. And that was the language of the church. And so that was seen as being the language of the literate. And then that idea, I guess, over time evolved into our modern day thinking that, they were illiterate. Because we lost that concept of, no, they were. They just didn't know Latin. So I wonder if this idea just got lost over time and they were literate to the language of those invaders. The invaders that took over were now literate. They were literate in their own language. They just couldn't use linear B, I think that probably might be the most likely conclusion.
Cages became centuries removed from the palaces of Mycenae. They never forgot the stories of the great kings, heroes, and wars of their mighty seafaring ancestors. Over time, the Mycenaean era came to be seen as a more magical age, where gods and spirits walked freely amongst mortals. To the
I think that happens very common throughout history, like the Three Kingdoms period. Yeah, Three Kingdoms period in China, that's been mythicized a lot. The Viking era, pretty mythicized. You've got people like Ragnar Lothbrok, who is probably a combination of multiple peoples, if he even existed at all. And then the supposed son of one of the supposed sons of Ragnar, Bjorn Ironside, who would become king of Sweden. He's become mythicized just because of his adventures. Like he traveled throughout the European world. So yeah, you got these time periods throughout history, and I always like them. They're always fun to look at.
Peloponnesian shepherd, the gods were real as earth and water, and their presence in an ancient tale did not compromise its realism. Without a writing system, these stories were preserved orally from generation to generation.
Grammarly does more than catch errors. With Grammarly,
What's really interesting is, when you think about it, most of human history has been preserved orally. Like a lot of what we know about Native American society, kind of through oral traditions that got passed down and then eventually were written down in like the 1800s. So yeah, a lot of oral, also Scandinavian history, very oral tradition based, until I think they became Christianized. Like a lot of what we know about the just Scandinavian culture, the pagan religion with Odin and Thor and stuff, that stuff was written by like an Icelander, someone in Iceland. I think the book is called, or the papers, or whatever is called, the Norse sagas or something like that. Nordic sagas or something. So who knows if those are accurate? Those are accurate maybe to Iceland. They may not be accurate to what was in Scandinavia, in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. But that's a little thing to think about.
The poet who probably existed at the end of the period was Homer. Modern historians are split on whether Homer was one man or a series of chroniclers building upon each other's works. So for the sake of...
I think I'm personally going to say possibly a series of people, or maybe even a group of people that came together to write, Homer's books, the Iliad and Odyssey. They were a bunch of learned Greeks, scholars, that came together to write this book, and they just penned it under Homer or something.
Linearity,
I think that'd be
we will
probable.
choose to depict him as the former. The seminal poet told the story of a vast armada of ships that had once set out across the Aegean Sea to lay siege to the great city of Troy. This story was the memory of an ancient war, so grand in scope that all the gods of Olympus were bound to interfere. By the time Greek civilization re-emerged from the Dark Ages, Homer's fantastical epic had been forever branded into its social memory, magnified by playwrights like Euripides and Sophocles. Thus far, we have explained how the Homeric tradition of classical Greece is essentially the mythicized memory of the Mycenaean Bronze Age that preceded it. With that said, to answer whether the Trojan War was real, we must jump far ahead in time to the late Victorian Age and dive down the rabbit hole of 19th century archaeology. The modern historiography of Troy is tied to an amateur German scholar, Heinrich Schliemann, to some the father of modern
Amateur, I don't know if it's fair to call him an amateur. Let's be real here. He possibly discovered Troy. You know, he's a millionaire. I think he was a millionaire when he decided to go for it. I don't know if then the discovery of Troy is what the supposed discovery of Troy is what made him rich or not. But if he was already a millionaire, you know, he didn't have to go off and he was just curious. He's like, "Oh, I want to see if we can find Troy or something." I don't know if that makes him an amateur scholar, man. Like that's impressive. Heck, even if it's not Troy, the fact that he went and dug up a city, he was able to find a city, though, an ancient city, that's pretty impressive. So I don't think it's fair to call him an amateur scholar.
in archaeology, to others a conman and thief.
Oh, okay.
Schliemann was a massive admirer of Greek antiquities, and at some point in the
Am I gonna get? I learned. I don't know if this is gonna be. If this video is gonna get uploaded before my reaction to Arzmas's ancient Greek video. It just depends on how I order the release. But that video, while a bit briefer on the topic of the Trojan War, kind of painted him in a more positive light. So let's see how they paint Schliemann. Let's see if they paint him in that more negative light. I'm curious.
1860s, decided to dedicate his life to the search for ancient Troy. Fortunately for him, he was friends with Frank Calvert, a British diplomat in the Ottoman Empire, who just so happened to own a piece of land, a mound called Hisarlik, which he claimed to be the site of Homer's great city.
Huh.
Allowed to excavate Hisarlik, the German archaeologist began with fervor.
So I guess knowing friends like that really does help. Huh.
In 1870. As his team dug straight down, Schliemann was overjoyed to find not one, but 9 ancient cities, all built atop one another throughout the last 3,000 years.
Yo, that's some. Hold up. That is luck. 9 ancient cities built on top of one another in one spot. Or, well, roughly the same spot. That's crazy. That is definitely an amazing find.
These archaeological layers were promptly named Troy 1 through Troy 9. The German asserted that the second deepest, and therefore the second oldest site, Troy 2, was the city from the Iliad. He even liberated a collection of bronze and gold artifacts from that layer, and draped them over his problematically young wife, dubbing them Priam's treasure. In truth, Troy 2 most likely dated back to 2300 BC or earlier, 1,000 years before the Trojan War could have taken place. To confound matters, in his haste to get to the bottom ruins, Schliemann had carelessly thrown out the artifacts found in Troy 6 through 9, the sites more likely to actually be Homer's Troy. Schliemann died in 1890.
Okay, so I guess I can kind of agree with the amateur scholar there, kind of. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with it. The real scholar wouldn't disregard the previous sites. A real scholar would use the previous sites. For instance, he would take the supposed newest site, the Troy 1, right? No, Troy 9, I guess. Whichever site is the one on top. And he would use that to get a date for that city, a rough time period for that city. And then as he goes down, he verifies more and more and more, so that as he goes down deeper and deeper, he can be more accurate as he goes down. And also would not throw out the artifacts. Hate it when people destroy artifacts.
Leaving behind an ethically questionable legacy and never having discovered the true city featured in the Iliad. Nevertheless, if there ever was a Troy, then the site of Hisalak was the most likely location for it. To explain why, we must jump back to the Bronze Age. By the early 1200s BC, the warlike Mycenaeans had conquered the Aegean Islands, the ancient civilization of Crete, and much of the southwestern Anatolian coastline. This expansion put them on the doorstep of another bellicose empire, the Hittites. Feuding between the Hittites and Mycenaeans was nothing new at that point, and with the two civilizations' spheres of influence inching closer and closer to one another, total war was a possibility. In this climate, northwestern Anatolia was beginning to look more and more like a juicy catch, a crucial borderland between two warlike, expansionist peoples. Troy itself was strategically crucial for both empires. Therefore, if there ever was a Trojan War, then it likely took place around the 1200s BCE at the apex of Mycenaean territorial expansion, and was surely an attempt by the Mycenaeans to secure a foothold against their Hittite rivals. Such a geopolitically crucial conflict could well have served as the basis from which the legend of the Iliad was born. Based on the discovery of an inscribed seal at the Hisarlik site by modern archaeologists, the modern consensus is that the Trojans themselves were Luwian, an Anatolian people closely related to the Hittites. While the Trojans of the Iliad appear to anachronistically follow the religious rites of the Greeks' Olympian gods, other clues to their Luwian Anatolian culture can be found in Homer's epic. The name of King Priam, for example, is likely derived from the Luwian title Pariamua, meaning exceptionally courageous, while his son Paris's name likely originates from Parisitis, another attested title among the Luwians of unknown meaning.
I've never heard of the term Luwians before. This is brand new to me, this part right here.
In the Iliad, Priam practices polygamy, a custom commonly associated with Bronze Age Anatolian kings, while Paris is a renowned marksman, drawing parallels to Anatolian warriors, who unlike the Greeks were excellent archers. Furthermore, the young prince's characterization as a vain and effeminate pretty boy may be the legacy of the Mycenaean outlook on the culture of the Anatolians, which they reductively saw as more hedonistic than their own. Perhaps
For Greek peoples to call another society hedonistic? Oh boy, that's saying something.
perhaps the most compelling parallels we can draw belong to Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships.
I just
Noble
forgot her
women
name,
of
but I knew she
Hittite-related
existed.
cultures tended to have more freedom and political influence than their Greek contemporaries. Homeric tradition relates that Helen was whisked away from her home in Sparta by the goddess of love Aphrodite and delivered to Paris to be his bride. In truth, if there ever was a real Helen, she may well have been a Mycenaean queen of Spartan origin. However, her elopement with a Trojan prince was certainly not born of godly intervention, but likely the result of an ambitious woman seeking to escape the confines of Greek social norms by fleeing to a land where freedom and power were more popular.
Maybe EOD techs are a very rare breed. EOD is part of the solution. We're the nation's defense.
Possible.
I agree with that. Yeah, no. Because nobility is typically more educated and also has a better understanding of the political situation in the wider world. Even a woman, a woman in a more patriarchal society would have an understanding of the societies around them. So she would kind of know about, let's say, oh, I'm gonna sneeze, man. I'm not gonna sneeze. Got it under control. She would at least know kind of about, or she'd have heard rumors about the society of Troy being more welcoming for women, and then she most likely there would have been a possibility of maybe not Paris, but like a Trojan ambassador or something, merchant or something, visiting her homeland or wherever she lived. So it is entirely possible that she would have fled her more patriarchal society for one where, she has more freedom. Entirely possible, especially if she's for an educated woman, it makes sense.
Overall, these surviving glimpses of Luwian Hittite culture among the Trojan nobles of the Iliad all point to the fact that Homer was indeed telling a mythicized version of a war that happened between Proto-Greek.
I just like the way he kind of said that. It's obvious that he told a mythicized version. I'm like, yeah, I mean, if the part about, the gods intervening doesn't tell you that it's mythicized, I don't know what will, but yeah, it's an obvious mythic tale.
Greeks and Anatolians, albeit from the distorted perspective of a Greek living 400 years after the conflict. Other kernels of reliable historiography in Homer's writings add further evidence that this great war took place in real life. In Book 2 of the Iliad, the seminal poet lists off the contingents of...
Fun fact, I've never read the Iliad. I've read Homer's Odyssey, but I have never read the Iliad. Let me tell you, the Odyssey was boring to read. It was so boring. Like, oh my god. I mean, not as boring as 1984, let me tell you. Fucking, oh my. Honestly, I feel like at some point I should just do a historian rant on 1984 and just how bad it is. Yeah. Anyways, back to the Trojan War.
Allies in the United Greek
I was having like a
Army,
PTSD of
a list that
1984.
has a remarkable amount of similarities to the locations of late Mycenaean archaeological sites. Later Homeric tradition relates that when the Greeks returned from Troy, their country fell into chaos and infighting, which corresponds with the fact that our presumed date for the Trojan War takes place right before the Bronze Age collapse. Perhaps the conquest of Troy was a last-ditch effort by the kings of Mycenae to preserve their power and prestige before their civilization crumbled into dust. It is not only Greek sources that shared evidence of a great clash at Troy. Surviving Hittite texts are full of many mentions of the Ahiyawa people, particularly their role in aiding the Asua Rebellion, a confederation of Hittite client cities on the west coast of Anatolia, including a certain Willusia that rose up in revolt against their imperial overlords around 1500 BC. Willusia was almost certainly Troy, and its name could be from where the Greek name for the city, Ilios, was derived. Meanwhile, the Ahiyawa were of course the Mycenaeans, always eager to help anyone willing to rebel against their Hittite rivals. The word Ahiyawa itself is probably a corruption of the word Achaeans. As compelling as it might be to link the Asua rebellion to the Trojan War, it is an unlikely match for a few reasons. Firstly, Hittite records claim that the Greeks and Trojans were allied in this conflict. Secondly, the insurrection was eventually crushed by the Hittite king Tudhaliya II. Finally, this conflict took place 200 years before the Trojan War most likely happened. However, the existence of these battles...
I'm sorry I'm not talking too much probably throughout this video, or at least right now. I'm learning, actually, right now. This is all new information to me.
In the Hittite records
All this
shows that
Hittite
the
stuff.
struggle between them and the Mycenaeans for the city of Troy was well underway by the mid-Bronze Age, making it very possible that the Proto-Greeks would try to establish control over the city again in later centuries. We've now accumulated a healthy amount of historical literary evidence that the Trojan War could well have happened. But does the archaeological evidence line up with the clues left behind by ancient chroniclers? Despite Schliemann's initial bungling, the excavation site was thankfully taken over in 1890 by a more competent Wilhelm Dörpfeld. Unlike Schliemann, who dug down as far as he could, Dörpfeld focused his efforts on the excavation of the comparatively newer layer of Troy 6. Through painstaking labour, he managed to unveil the remains of an elevated citadel that had once boasted high walls and towers of stone, and large houses within it for the rich and powerful. Dated to have been inhabited from 1700 to 1250 BC, Troy 6 fit well into the timeline of Homer's war. However, evidence of its eventual destruction pointed not to an invasion of Mycenaean Greeks, but rather a natural disaster, earthquake. This revelation shook the scholarly world and led many to create fringe theories that the destruction of Troy in the Iliad was not a literal war, but instead a metaphor. Poseidon was the Olympian god of earthquakes, and the horse was his sacred beast. Could it be that the iconic wooden horse that destroyed
I would not have pieced that together. Wow, that is impressive.
Troy was not a physical object, but Mycenaean chroniclers interpreting Troy's natural destruction as a manifestation of Poseidon's wrath? These theories would persist until the 1930s, when an American archaeologist named Carl Blegen took charge at the Hassalic site. His work centered around the site of Troy 7 and revealed something remarkable. Firstly, Troy 7 was not a new city at all, but the same city as Troy 6, rebuilt upon the same foundations after the earthquake. Secondly, its existence was punctuated by war. Within what had once been its fortified citadel, houses that had once belonged to individual wealthy families were now subdivided, as if made to house an influx of refugees. The pithoi that had once stored grain, wine and olive oil were buried to make them last longer. All signs pointed to the fact that Troy 7 was a city under siege. Blegen also found signs of fire damage and arrowheads, potentially of Mycenaean make. Blegen's discoveries would be built upon in 1988, when the excavations of one Manfred Kaufmann on the site of Troy 7 revealed that all archaeologists who had come before him had barely scratched the surface. While they had focused their excavations around Troy's elevated citadel and main palace, Kaufmann's meticulous dig team revealed the existence of an entire massive lower city, complete with homes, walls, and an underground water system that had been used by the Trojans for 2,000 years. Like the citadel above it, the lower city displayed a scene of desperation. Evidence of fire damage was widespread. Arrowheads were embedded into the walls of homes, skeletons of the dead remained unburied, and piles of sling stones lay on the streets for the city's defenders to hurl upon the enemy invading their home. It was almost certainly war that brought down the city of Troy sometime in the early 12th century BC.
Wow.
So did that legendary duel between Achilles of the Greeks and Hector of the Trojans happen? Most likely not. But was there a great city of Troy? The evidence, both literary and archaeological, tells us almost certainly yes. Finally, did an armada of Greek warriors ever sail across the Aegean and do battle upon its mighty walls? That we may never know for sure. But as archaeologists continue to explore the remains of the once great ancient city, it becomes evident that there is some truth to Homer's legend. We will continue exploring these semi-mythical stories of the past, so make sure you are subscribed.
Wow. I was not expecting to learn that much. Wow. Wow, I'm honestly kind of blown away a bit. Damn. They did some amazing research. Holy crap. I wonder how long they spent I guess researching this, how much they read, that's wow. Dang, that's impressive. I don't know. I have nothing else to say. I don't have anything to add. I'm just amazed. I'm impressed and amazed. Okay, go ahead and leave a comment down below, I guess, as to what you'd like to see me react to next. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thank you.